identifying the right people and creating the systems for consistency, because this is one of those things like everything else. It is consistency over time that ultimately starts to build the momentum that then at some point you don't have to do much, if any, outbound, right? And I'm not saying I'm going to be there in a year or 2 years. I think outbound is always important for growth-oriented people like us. But if I can have a system to rely on, then the outbound becomes icing on the cake, not the cake.
Welcome to the Speak to Freedom podcast. I'm your host, Anthony Trucks. Today's guest is Brian Bogert. He's an amazing human. He's went through a crazy journey of literally losing his arm, having it reattached, and from that, exploring life, going through a lot of craziness, but learning how to go from waste to wealth. And he goes on stage and talks about this incredible story of his life, but also in this discussion, we understand how to not just have a cool story, but have a great impact and make great income from it. He talks about how he grew his business and as a speaker in this world to be able to impact amazing lives and make great income doing it. And you're going to hear kind of unique things that I teach him while we're going through this that you can apply right now to your speaking business or to launch it off the ground if you're just getting started. So if you're a person looking for a cool story or you're looking for a cool set of systems, maybe some ideas and strategies to launch your speaking business, you're going to love today's episode. So without further ado, let's get into the episode. Here we are back in the saddle with my man, Brian Bogert. Guys, we've known each other for a long time. This is my brain's already smoky. Look, I said a long year. Bear with me, B. It's going to get there, I promise. We've known each other for a lot of years. We've had great conversations. The guy's got a heart of gold, and I'm excited to bring him to you so we can actually get, we'll call some cool nuggets from his brain of what he's built. So without further ado, Mr. Bogert, how you doing today, sir?
Dude, I'm with you, so I'm doing phenomenal. I just love whenever you and I are together. I appreciate the interaction, the exchange of energy, and your heart, dude. It's always pure, so it's fun to be with you.
I appreciate it, man. Feelings mutual. But this today is for the people. You know what I'm saying? For the people today, dog. So we're gonna dive in and really unpack some things that can help individuals who are looking to be speakers, like you are currently. As we get into this, I usually like to start out with people understanding why you're a person to even listen to, right? So do you mind sharing with folks what your actual message is about when you come to the world? And then let's start unpacking like how you came to that being your message.
Yeah. So the reality of it is I like to say today that I'm a husband and father first. I say that because it's the only thing binary in my world, but my actions were not always congruent. There was a big period in my life where I was getting reactions or feeling a certain way because of my actions that I believed were in alignment with my intent, but often they weren't, right? And if I look at my whole entire journey, just to give a super 30,000 foot level so that there's context, when I was 7, I was run over by a truck. My left arm was torn from my body and it was reattached. Now that's one of the stories that I'm best well known for. What's interesting is I used to believe as a speaker that was my transformation story, that this was like my origin story. This is my everything. And oh, by the way, it is in a lot of respects. But what I learned later in life is that it was also the story that actually created a lot of trash in my past that I pushed through and pushed down for years. And I didn't realize it. And there was multiple periods, of some of which we'll unpack today, that ultimately I had an experience in life that shifted my perspective dramatically and allowed me to get back on track. Today, we work with individuals and organizations to identify and remove the waste they don't even know exists within and transform it into wealth-generating activities that will connect and convert. A lot of it's focused on human behavior and human connection so that we ultimately can live and operate at our highest level of performance and potential.
Which is the big thing, man, because all of us have it in there. There's times when all of us have been in the past in those, I want to say the groove of just high output, high performance. You feel like you're I'm going to say you feel like your balls are on fire. If you're a lady, your lady balls, it's just, you're rocking and rolling. Yeah, lady balls. That's kind of a good one. I just made it up. I don't think I made it up just now. I just recalled it for the first time in a long time. But the idea is it's a good tick to be at. But you're right. A lot of people have things that are slowing them down, weighing them down at minimum. When you kind of went through your journey of before we even talk about how you turned into a message that brought it on stage, What was your personal journey of working through that, right? Because a lot of us have this and we know we got baggage.
Yeah.
There's someone listening right now going, yeah, I know, but like they haven't done anything with it. What did you do differently than most people do?
Yeah, there's a couple phases, and I say that right out of the gate because I can cram it all into one answer, or it'll come in our conversation. I'm going to give some context because it's important to understand. When I first came out of the hospital, I had a teddy bear in between my arm. I was cute. I always had I drew attention, and so inevitably people would come up and ask me what happened to me. Two things would happen in that moment because I would look them deadpan in the eye when they were expecting me to be like, I flew off the jungle gym or whatever, right? I'd say I was run over by a truck and my left arm was torn off. And after I saw their jaws hit the floor and pick it back up, 99% of them would pause and they'd turn immediately to look at my parents for validation, which told me they didn't believe me, my own truth that I'm living and existing in. And then they would start to view me through their lens of what they'd be capable of in my situation, immediately limiting me. And so what I believed at that time was not only that I wasn't going to be seen and understood and connected at the deepest level, but that people weren't going to believe my truth. So I heard at that time that mindset and mental toughness were everything. You'll hear later on that this was a part that unwound me, but what did that mean? I was out on a mission to prove that I could do anything, right? To prove to everyone else, and really in reality to prove it to myself that I could. But what was the narrative? Brian's good, Brian's strong, Brian's capable, Brian can do anything himself. Served me really well for a long time. And then at 20, I re-broke my left arm in a snowboarding injury. Found myself completely alone. 10 months with it hanging by my side because 7 surgeons were afraid to touch me because of medical malpractice. And I started to get this resentment early on, like, man, I've helped all my friends. I'm showing up. I've got all these brothers. I've got girls around. Why isn't anybody here to help me? Right? And then I started to realize they just bought into the power of my narrative. Brian's good. Brian's strong. Brian's capable. Brian can do anything himself. And so this was the moment that I didn't have the courage to ask for help. And that's what they believed I would do. So I started to lean into vulnerability and authenticity, which are huge buzzwords. And so to be clear, the way I viewed it at the time was I thought they were the glue that bound human connection. So that focused a lot of my next effort, which was to figure out how I could share just enough about myself to get others to open up and lower their armor so that I could drive a Mack truck through and focus on their problems and still avoid my own. Right? And we do that, right? And through all of this, what I also realized is that I started to realize that I was starting to receive love, validation, and connection through performance. So it was always contingent on what I did. And that's in fact what I believed the world told me I needed to do to establish who I was to chase the whats. What house, what car, what amount of money. Why do I say all that? Because by age 27, I had it all. We had a $10 million business growing at the time. I was in the risk management employee benefits consulting field, but I realized I had all the whats I ever wanted, but it cost me who I was. I'll pause this answer at that place because how I started to unpack it took place over the course of the next 12 years. But I know that knowing you, there's probably a question you're going to redirect or take me. But when I realized that it cost me who I was, that was the moment I hired my first coach. And that was really the path to what, though I'd been doing on the side since age 7, which was speaking on stages to motivate, inspire, raise money, it became a profession. And I started to utilize my story to then impact others in a formal way.
Yeah. Well, we have to go through the craziness to be able to talk about the craziness, right? That I guess the asset we have is the hardship in times. And so it's good that you're able to go through this. I think one thing that most people, they're not able to do is to communicate their, we'll call it their inefficient aspects or the sucky parts of their life, right? And so your ability to kind of go in and go, look, I wasn't doing the best here. And I could notice that and see that. That's a big piece. It's the awareness to be able to see ourselves in that light and realize it doesn't mean you suck as a human or you don't belong here. It just means you're able to see your stuff, which does give you insight to move yourself forward farther and faster while you do it. And so you mentioned
that's the first thing, by the way, that I tell everybody about the trash from their past is that the trash from your past is not your fault.
Interesting.
It just becomes your responsibility once you become aware of it or you start burying others in yours.
Yeah.
Right. And that's the reality. It's generationally inherited. It's patterned down. It's out of cellular love or trauma passes in DNA. Right.
Are there ever ways that it could be? Another thing is, it could be your fault, but doesn't mean you're faulty. I'm not saying it's always your fault, but because I agree. There's
let me give an example
here. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, let me give an example of exactly where you're going with this. Look, bro, like the other part of my story is that I dealt with deep levels of shame and deep levels of anger. Yeah. Anger that almost cost me everything and everyone in my life that I ever cared about. Now, here's the reality. I genuinely was unconscious to how my actions were coming across and how my energy was translating outside of me. Yeah. I didn't have the conscious awareness, which meant that my anger wasn't a choice, right? So to your point, was I at fault for creating an environment that lacked emotional safety in my household in many situations? My actions demonstrated it. But my unconscious patterns that led to that anger, until I became aware of it, ultimately I was operating based on the cellular memory and the conditioning in my life more than I was from a conscious level of choice. So the shame and blame factor is the biggest thing that impacts most people. Shame is the lowest registerable frequency on the entire scale. And so the second we start to put the shame and blame in our own environment, it doesn't allow us to see the situations objectively and non-judgmentally, even for ourselves. So what would happen? My wife would ask me a simple question like this. She'd be like, hey, honey, what do you want to do with the kids this weekend? And I would hear it this way through my shame and anger filter. Hey, honey, you've not done enough to be a good husband and father here recently, so what are you going to do to make up for it this weekend? Then all of a sudden I feel myself react and I rattle off the 10 things I've done in the last 4 days to show her I'm a good husband and father, right? Until I become consciously aware that those things are even taking place, it's difficult to escape the pattern. And so that's what I mean when I say it's not my fault. And here's the reality. My anger was tied to a deep source that came from my childhood in 3 different areas.
I see that.
Right? And I was unconscious to it for a long time. Now, I had to step into responsibility and ownership as soon as I became aware.
So it's kind of like, what do they call it? It's like manslaughter, but not, in a sense of like, it's probably the worst word to use for it, I think, at the same time.
I know where you're going. Go ahead.
It's like it was a complete accident. Somebody dies and it's like, it's on you. It's like, oh man, because it's saying, while it is your fault, you didn't do it with malicious intent. You didn't do it with conscious awareness. So yeah. But there is, I think there's something to that in the sense of when you put it on you and you do that, if people don't look at it properly, they'll feel like, oh, I'm broken. It's like, no, you're not broken, right? There's nothing wrong. It's like there may be something wrong that can be worked upon, but it's not a life sentence, we'll call it. So you're saying this happened. Yeah, you didn't do it intentionally, maliciously. It was going on because you had this thing functioning. You were completely unaware it was functioning, and it did that. But now if we go back and take a look at this, we can undo it or rectify this.
I can deconstruct it and I can learn from it. Correct. Yeah. Right. And to your point exactly on the manslaughter, I mean, I look at what came to mind immediately when you said that. The guy who was in the truck that hit me.
Yeah.
He didn't do it on purpose.
No.
But it was technically his fault. Right. And so there's an element that's in there. And it's like, I can have a little bit of empathy and compassion for the fact that it was an honest mistake that could have happened to any of us. Yeah. Right. Honestly. And so I don't have resentment or anger towards him, but he suffered from that until the end of his life, right? Because the guilt he carried when it was an accident, right? Completely. And so that's where it comes from. But a lot of what we teach in this waste to wealth methodology comes from my having to recognize the areas that I was reacting to things that I wasn't even conscious to, and had nothing to do with what was right in front of me, which was taking me out of the present moment and not allowing me to have what I want and actually exist as who I was, because I was constantly in a protective state.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's interesting. I think as I'm going through this, I think I want to spin this whole conversation on its head a little bit, because I want to take what we're doing and I want to take that, like, call it like if it's the focal point of like a magnifying glass, I want to point it somewhere else, right? Because I'm talking about at mass, right? People having this take place. I'm talking to people who, in my opinion, are trying to grow something. They're trying to take their message to the world. And so part of it is there are things that they know to do, but they aren't doing them. And it's your fault, right? You may be completely unconscious to what's going on, but it's your fault. You can't get on stage, can't grow the business, all that kind of stuff. When you pointed that filter in that manner towards yourself, how did you start building up the speaking business that you have? Because we got the message now, but a great message doesn't always end up on stage. How did you get that on stage?
Honestly, what I did more than anything in the very beginning was I took the initial framework, concept, and messaging, and I figured out how to get as many reps as I could. So if that was on podcasts, if that was in generalized conversation, and I did this originally with the embrace pain, avoid suffering concept that we still speak on, but this waste to wealth methodology that we now teach, it was the same thing, right? I had to understand the framing, and what did I do through reps? One, I tested a variety of language. I got to see what landed, what actually moved people, what stuck in their thoughts, right? Because I can read people real time. And even if it's a one-to-one and not a one-to-many, you get feedback if you're paying attention. If you're not so attached to the message and you allow yourself to like really figure out how to connect with the message and deliver it in a way that it's felt, then people will resonate. So that was the beginning part of it, right? And I had been speaking on stages for years before on other topics, but there was two ways that it went about. In the very beginning, it was all through referral, all through my network and all through the philanthropic side that ultimately got me there. But it was also very in-person, localized in geography, and didn't expand the message. So podcasts opened up that world. Now, through that, I also built so many relationships with people who happen to run podcasts, who also run events. And inevitably, because of the way that they resonated and felt my message, I get an invitation to go speak in their room, which creates more opportunity for the same thing. What I always do, whether it's a podcast or a stage, is to figure out how do I turn or amplify one interaction or one opportunity into multiple. It's where our RVI strategy on podcasting came from, but it applies to stages as well. And so ultimately, I'm looking to build relationship, create the deepest amount of value that I can, and create impact wherever I go. I have a hesitation in many respects, and it was my own self-preservation to not sell from stage, right? There are environments that I've needed to put embedded elements into it, but my goal is to not just go infuse energy, it's to create an experience that transforms the audience. And so for me, it's a lot of intention in understanding going into when I get those opportunities, who's in the room, what's the message need to look like, how do I curate and customize this same framework that I teach so that I can communicate it with words that are accessible to who's going to be in the room. And when I can curate and craft it that way, the message always lands harder. And so that was the beginning piece. Well, all of that creates opportunity to get B-roll, to get film, to get things to build a speaker reel, but it also gets much more clarity in the message. And so now I can utilize, both from a referral standpoint or a cold outreach standpoint, assets and understanding on the portions of my message that I know will land with certain audiences to then propel that into opportunity. You know, you and I talked earlier, it's like, look, you're doing this at a bigger level than I am right now, which is why I always study and learn from you, right? Because whatever I do, I create opportunity, but I'm also always looking for ways to create more systemization around it and more amplification in what I can do without losing human. And so that's what I focus on always. You know, for keynotes, the intentionality of going the extra level of having a pre-talk interview, to be able to do a pre-talk video to get that crowd hyped, to do a download and a recap with that organization in a formal way afterwards. It extends the real estate we're taking up in everybody's minds and hearts and allows that impact to actually resonate and permeate at a deeper level.
I agree, man. It's a big piece of all of it. It's a collective grouping of all those little pieces that over time creates momentum that grows it all. Mm-hmm. That's the one thing people don't understand in this game, at least. It's a patience game, you know. No, it's a patience game when you're impatient. That's like exactly the best way, right? We all want to be at the high level, but I don't think we have to go at the same speed. Like some can go faster. There are ways, and I like that you did allude to some of the things that most people wouldn't even think to, like the pre-event, the post-event, the videos. These are little nuances that I had a call today with a company that oversees like big brands. Like it's like if you've gone to fast food ever in your life, you have many times gone to this company. They oversee tons of them, right? And the big piece of it is it's like there's a structure and a flow to it where it's all woven together. And like they were surprised that I was talking about doing this. And they're like, is that going to be more money? I'm like, no, it's the same fee. Oh, heck yes, we do want it, right? It builds this value. I didn't even know this and talking off the phone and talk to the person that's booking me. They go, I think you're going to get the booking. I go, I thought we already got it. They go, no. Like this was a pre-event kind of call, which I was way off and misunderstanding. They said, but whatever you did, locked it in. I'm like, okay, good, right? Yeah. So, but the idea is the things you're talking to that are nuances most don't do. Now, here's what I want to know is how did you know to do some of this stuff, or did you never know? Because most people that are hearing this, they probably hearing it for the first time. When I first got in the industry, it was a gray smorgasbord of things of what do I do to get on the stage where I'm watching somebody who I am better than. I'm like, I am better than this dude up here. How did you get this, right? How did you start finding out? Did you plug away? Did you ask a lot of questions? What was your pathway to getting the information to start trying and I put it out into the world to get the traction you have now?
Yeah, so I mean, I have to be totally honest that a lot of what I did or do in speaking is a lot of the ways that I would create growth and impact in our old business. I've been using video for prospecting and communication for 15 years. Why? I don't know. I had this intuition to lean in and be like, look, I know that people, like 7% of our communication is in the words that we use, right? 38% is in the delivery, the tone, and the cadence, and 55% is in the nonverbals. And so for me, I look at it, I'm like, I can send emails, I can send DMs, I can send texts, but that's giving people less than 10% of what I actually intend to communicate. I can get on the phone and have a teleconference. I can leave voicemails. I can leave voice notes. Much better than just text, but I'm still giving people less than 50% of what I intend to communicate. However, if I can give someone an experience in a video and start to ask those questions, what happens is you build trust at a deeper level and they get to understand and trust who you are, your authentic approach. And then when you show up in person and you're the same person that you were on video, right, and the congruence exists, then people just accept, right? And so for me, I utilized a lot of my old relationship and prospective building skill sets that I learned and developed in having to write very complex deals with huge budgets and multiple decision makers. Speaking, I actually find to be a lot easier. Typically, there's one or two decision makers, and in a matter of a quick conversation, if you can connect with people, you actually can shorten that curve. And so that's always been my approach is how do I insert human? How do I make sure that they can feel who I am beyond what they can find about me online? And so I'm looking for ways to interact that way. I just did a keynote for the leadership event for a $500 million surface contractor not long ago. What's interesting is all of this panned out and played in, and right, like we got this weird submission on our website that showed us this date, and it was weird, the timing was off, and it didn't make sense. And so I just picked up the phone and called the guy. Now, he had been doing research on all of the things that have happened with me online, so he already was like, oh man, Brian's a big deal. What's funny, I'm not, but like it can look that way because of the way that our SEO has worked for us. So he gets in, and the second I tell him who it is, he's like, wait, you're calling me directly? I was like, yeah, I'm not sending a team to find out what I need to talk about. Like, I'm the one delivering the message. I was like, so yeah, my team might have helped coordinate this time, but so then it led immediately to a conversation. 10 minutes later, he's like, if it was up to me 100%, decision would be mine. It'd be done. You'd have it. Awesome. What's next? Well, I want you to meet with the CEO. Cool, let's do it. I sent him a video that would actually demonstrate and describe a summary of our conversation in a way that the CEO could feel before I ever met him. I walk in the room, we had a 15-minute meeting, we landed the deal. We did the pre-interview, we sent a video. Why I go down this path and tell you all this, because what I've learned with time is that the more questions I ask, the more clarity I get, the more understanding I get, and the more pattern recognition I get to be able to replicate this in the future, right? So I had so much insight on the organization by the time I took the stage. I had a 90-minute talk. I found out the next day this is the impact. There were 3 executives, 2 of them were C-suite in the organization, for 6 years have had conflict. They've had conflict resolution, right? HR come in, private equity come in, CEO, COO, they've all tried to help. Nothing works. They've spent hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars of time, energy, and resources trying to fix this. Because I understood the messaging and what was actually dividing their group and keeping them disconnected versus coming together and be connected. Literally, they walked outside 5 minutes after the talk and said, we've got some trash to identify and take out. Sat together for 45 minutes, outlined a plan, and communicated to the CEO next day. Okay. Now, what does that also do, though? The impact in the room has led to, I now have a consulting contract with them. I'm going back and doing another keynote in 6 months. And they could see and feel the impact of what I was teaching real time in such a congruent way that how could they refute the ideas and the concepts that we're communicating about? Right. And so I believe the more I can be congruent and the more aware and intentional I can be in all of those interactions, the more impact I can have. And to me, it's not about how do I get in and get out. It's about how do I leave the greatest impact I possibly can within whatever time I have.
Hey, Anthony Trucks here. I want to invite you, if you're a speaker or an aspiring speaker who wants to be able to make up to $10,000, $15,000 per keynote, to go to speaktofreedom.com. Here's why. I speak for a living and I love what I do. I live in a world where I want more people to experience, though. I want you to be able to have that be a part of your life, your reality, where you can actually hop on more stages, get more clients, do more consulting, make more income while making an amazing impact in the world. I have a system that does this. This is not guesswork. It's not because I'm great as a speaker. It's because I know how to work the business systems to make this a reality. If you want access to these systems, go to speaktofreedom.com. You'll find out about the entire process, how it works. You can watch a whole training on it to get an idea of how my system runs. And then if you need help with it, I'd love to help you. So head over to speaktofreedom.com. But let's get back into the episode, Brian. Yeah, and if you do that, you'll get back in. It's not about getting in and getting out. It's about getting in and staying in. Because most people think, like, I got to work with all these different companies. You don't. You mean you want to speak for as many as you can.
Yeah.
But if you can hold a good two or three that have a solid contract base, and you can, the word's going to sound bad, but infiltrate in a good way,
Yeah.
then you have the ability to have a longevity, grow a brand, make great income, make great impact. So it's a unique thing that they're not thinking too much. Now 90 minutes, I'm not going to lie, that's a lot. I have done 90 in the past. I don't like going past like 50. Like if because I got a lot of energy I give. When I hear 90, I go, oh, 2 keynotes back to back immediately. I go, nah, like I don't want to do that. And I'm not saying it's a good or bad thing, but I love how you're able to go. I walked in because here's what people don't know you have to do. You have to really manage the emotion of the room for 90 minutes. You're an orchestrator of the mind, of the body. And there's something that happens at that 60-minute mark that most people who are not currently speaking don't realize, which is the room is ready to go. Like they are ready to leave the room because our brains know, like, it's been an hour. It's been an hour. Like if you're watching a movie, that's when you'll like check your watch to see how long the movie is. How long we've been watching it, right? The brain just kind of knows. And so to be able to get people through that next 30 minutes and desire more, there's a power to that most people, they don't get the really uniqueness to it till they're in that position. People who are speakers listening now, they get that, man. So kudos to you. So
well, and I would tell you, majority of mine are 45 minutes to 60 minutes, but that also goes to curating based on the audience and what impact needs to be had, right? The only reason it was 90, they paid me the same amount either way. I didn't charge them more for the extra 30 minutes. The reason it was 90 was because I knew the foundation that had to be led to open the room to receive the message that the CEO and the private equity company ultimately wanted them to feel and hear. Yeah.
Well, one thing I think is also good here that I want to pinpoint and point out is most individuals who want to speak or are speaking going, how do I get to the level of, Brian, you, me, doing higher level things. The idea is it's not just about telling your cool story. Because what's interesting as we're going through this is we've only really touched on a piece of your story, right? What you really have is valuable, and what our speakers have is valuable is a process tied to a valuable message. There's a message that they go, I get the message. That makes sense. Then we're walking through the process that they can go apply to take value from the message that came from our stories. So how did you go about, and when maybe did you go about figuring out like, hey, I can't just walk in here and be a glorified YouTube video and just share my story and walk out. There's got to be some weight to it. When did that take place, and how did you develop that?
So because I had spoken on, that's a great question, and I'm really happy you asked it. Because I had spoken largely to just tell my story for motivation and philanthropic reasons for 20 years, right? I mean, literally from age 7, I was on stages speaking for the hospital and Children's Miracle Network and a bunch of organizations, but it was all through the lens of, exactly to your point, just telling my story. Yeah. Right? There wasn't depth behind it. Now, what I have learned to normalize, and I would tell you when it hit, was probably within the first 18 months of me starting to speak professionally. Okay. Because when I started to expand to actually get compensated for it or to get on formal stages, it wasn't solely for the motivation. It was about the impact. And so for me, yes, my story can create a lot of ideas and motivation for people. But what I also realized is my story is only so relatable to a point. Yeah. So I have to actually normalize my story quickly and then start to integrate elements of it that are relatable to others. Because the idea of getting your arm ripped off, it's audacious and scary and crazy. But what I say to most, and this is where I start to normalize in the beginning, is I'll say, look, regardless of the extremities of your stories, what's important is that you learn to pause and become aware of the lessons you can extract so that you can become intentional with how you apply those moving forward. So that's where I start to compress time. And then very little beyond that point has anything to do with my arm. It has everything to do with interactions, lessons, ways that I was showing up differently, how it impacted my business, how it impacted my relationships, how it impacted my time, how it impacted my health, right? And I speak from something that is relatable and accessible, and I use examples, whether my own or examples of clients and others, to be able to connect those dots. Now, what I did for a while, instead of just using my own stories or the ones that I had, as I was building my speaking, I studied people that I thought had unique stories, and I would tell stories of well-known people. And that worked to a point, right? I would tell this deeper hidden story behind Michael Jordan. I would talk about Aeneas Williams. I'd give these things that ultimately showed the lesson or kept it connected, but there would inevitably be these moments where it felt like they were being forced into the talk for the purposes of trying to land a story around a message. And so what did that mean to me? I need to slow down more, and I need to actually do and practice what I'm teaching, which is I need to understand the methodology, the state of mind, the emotional state that I was in when these points in my life hit, and how did I deconstruct and create a path to move myself through it. So it's not a system or strategy or tactics, but to give pragmatic application of my story and how I had to work through unpacking how to reframe with my wife and repair with the anger and reverse generational patterns in the home. And ultimately then give an example of language, which is like, oh yeah, hey, now when I get triggered, I have language to say something to the effect of, hey, honey, I just got triggered by what you said, which tells me that I didn't hear you correctly. I'm going to try to hear it from a more neutral lens. Could you try stating it again? And if I'm not capable of doing so, maybe we can revisit this later. But if I hadn't gone to the full effect of understanding the event, the trigger point, the what moved through me, how the reaction had an impact in the environment, so that I could describe the situation, but also how I had to move through it, then all of it would just be empty. It's just story, right? Yeah. To your point, you have to give a framework and something for people to attach to, because whether there's a direct call to action at the end of your talk or not, if you integrate a methodology and the message and the purpose behind it, and you land it in stories that are relatable and accessible, then people will remember how they felt and how they thought in that moment. Companies that I speak for utilize our language. I just met with the CEO of one yesterday, and he's like, dude, a year later, we're still talking about taking out the trash and where armor is disconnecting us. Like almost exact language. I was with them for 45 minutes a year ago. That's the only interaction I had with that company, right? And yet the language was accessible enough that they connected it, related it, and remembered it. And that's what I want always when I speak is I don't want to be a 1 hour blip in somebody's life. Yeah, I want that to be an inflection point for them to be like, oh shit, I saw Brian speak 10 years ago and this one thing he said changed my fucking life.
Yeah, and that's really what it has to be, because they're not going to remember everything. I had a call with somebody. They go, we had a really great speaker. He talked about this thing. I can't recall his name. And I go, ooh, that means, was he the best one ever? But he really did recall. They recalled the concept. They knew what he was talking about, right? And that's really what it boils down to. And if you guys are listening and not getting what he's talking about, what he did is he went through something. He understood or went the distance to understand what he'd gone through, what he'd navigated. And from there said, here's the march, here's the recipe to how I made these cookies, right? And then what I'm doing is I'm going on stage and I'm sharing the recipe so you can make cookies. When you have that kind of simple mentality behind it, this is what allows you to be able to go in beyond the actual, just the speech. There's a difference, I think, between motivational speaking and keynote speaking. Because like my daughter, she'll go to school and her friends will go, oh, your dad's just a motivational speaker. And I go, you tell him I'm not. They go, what do you mean? I go, tell him I'm a keynote speaker. I'm brought into keynote events that have very specific themes, topics, concepts, and takeaways. They don't pay me $27,000 to go in there and tell my story. I'm there to do a specific thing with them. And so it's only, I think, a keynote, not a motivational speech, when you have the framework that you're talking to. There's something to it, man. People got to get that figured out. So you now are in a position where you've been building something cool. You're taking it to the world. What do you find is what are you working on for the speaking business now? I know we've just kind of briefly beforehand talked about it, but I want people to get because there's always a journey we're on. There's levels I want to go to. There's fees that I want to climb into. What I like to tell people in our space, it's not always about, going and being the best speaker in the world or like trying to find ways to get paid more. I think it's just accessing higher speaking fee books, meaning there are types of events that are always going on every year that have a set fee or a budget for speakers. The goal is to break into that, not to get the previous client to start paying you more money, because that's harder. So what are you doing to, access higher budgets or build your brand?
Yeah, that what I'm working on right now is breaking through to what you had just talked about. Because most of my stuff historically has come through a very direct correlation of sweat equity and something that I've done to create opportunity, or in the referrals as a result of it. And so when I say that I'm in the process of trying to systematize outreach in a better way, I don't mean that by just creating automations.
Yeah.
I mean that in saying there are still pathways in the speaking business that I have not gotten access to, even if I've spoken for very large organizations that have significant budgets.
Yeah.
And so for me, it's about identifying that audience right now and creating a pathway to get to them. Because I've been very blessed that I've had referrals and I've had a lot of opportunities, and my annual speaking fees are pretty damn good. I'm in the top couple of percent of the speakers in the world, right? And yet the difference between me and the top 0.5%, which is where you are, right, is exponential. And so for me, what I also recognize is that my motivation to get on stage has shifted and changed. It used to be really about getting a higher fee, going in and having a conversation. What I'm finding today is that I'm able to tie it to a deeper purpose, which is connected to our broader mission. And every single organization that I get to be a part of, I have the privilege to speak to, is a part of our exponential impact, because I believe that moved people move people. And so I'm looking at every speaking opportunity as a chance to amplify our impact and create another workforce of individuals, a whole army of people who can start to adopt the concepts and the knowledge that I teach and believe that I believe improves all of us as humans. And so that's what I'm working on, is identifying the right people and creating the systems for consistency, because this is one of those things like everything else. It is consistency over time that ultimately starts to build the momentum that then at some point you don't have to do much, if any, outbound, right? And I'm not saying I'm going to be there in a year or 2 years. I think outbound is always important for growth-oriented people like us. But if I can have a system to rely on, then the outbound becomes icing on the cake, not the cake. And that's what I'm trying to build right now.
I like that. That's a good way to do it, man. It's like the outbound's a big piece of it, and there is going to be the thing at the time. But if you do it right, it's called speech spin, we call it. So I go out and I drum business up from the business I just had. It's a consistent kind of flow, but it does has to work in duality, man. There's also areas where you can build relationships with those who actually are getting those clients reaching out. So like bureaus are a good thing, meeting planners are a good thing. That's recommendations for you for sure, is to establish relationships. When I first started out, I was like, man, I don't want somebody taking 25+% of my speaking fee. And I go, yeah, if you're only making like $5,000, it's a lot. But if you're making like $25,000, deal with it. Like it's gonna be all right.
And I happily share fees. I've got a couple bureaus that are doing some stuff. That's one of my targeted focuses, is try to build that though. Because I look at that and I'm like, dude, I'll put skin in the game all day long. And if somebody can open the door for me, here's the reality. Every opportunity I've ever gotten from a bureau, every one, I've won. Because opening the door sometimes is the hardest part, but it doesn't matter who the stack is up against. I know that what I'm doing is unique and different, and I know they'll feel that in our interaction. So that's the hardest part for me, is opening the door. That's it. I
agree. And what I recommend doing is find a whole lot of doors that you can open, right? But then also, I just recently, it was one of my clients. I was having a conversation with him. He goes, how do I, I'm on this bureau. What do I do? I go, well, the bureau itself, you're on their website now. I say, but nobody knows you. No one's worked with you in that bureau. You're hoping that someone's going to come along and need specifically what you have. They're not going to go to the website for this company, Google by the little thing, or like search and then find your name and go, we want that guy. They're going to ask them to send them 3 to 5 people. You need to be one of the 3 to 5. A couple things hinder individuals from being one of the 3 to 5. One is there's no track record. They've never worked with you, right? So that's why the first event you do with a bureau is paramount. You got to kill it. Like you got not just kill it from on stage, but like everything around how it is to work with you, how seamless it is, to where they attach your name to like safe bet. When you're a safe bet, beautiful, right? Then I go, well, whatever bureau that you go to, if they have 10 different people who are selling, you need to have a meeting with 10 different people. I go, why 10? I go, well, because 10 of those people at that bureau, you're on that website. And if you are in their mind, you need to be able to have this thing take place. They get in a call. They go, who's a possible person? They go, oh, Brian Bogert. And they go, what's his story? If they haven't met with you and they don't know you or how to sell you, they can't say, oh, here's his story. They may have watched your video, but they know as much as the client knows, right? So I hold meetings with all these bureaus and the people. And I go, hey, I'm on this bureau. I'd love to talk to you. And I want you to know who I am. And I'll tell them how I flow, what I do, proposal videos, how I send those, how I work with different clients. I do pre-event stuff. I do post-event. So they got like a list of like, this dude's legit. Now, at this point in my career, I'm on enough bureaus. I don't need to go on more of them. But that was a big thing for me to get myself into the position to be put in almost every proposal that company was sending out. And it drummed it up quickly. There's
Yeah.
also some things you can do. I'll tell you offline, 'cause I think it's going to be, we'll keep that behind the vest a little bit.
Well, I mean, what you just said is gold, and the extra level of intentionality to understand all the influencers who can create opportunity within one touch point is sort of what I was saying earlier that I try to amplify. I've not done that though. Full disclosure, I've not done that with the bureaus that I am connected with, and you just gave me a gift. That's low hanging fruit.
Go do that one, my guy. It's a straightforward one, and they actually enjoy it. I've never gotten to someone and going like, oh gosh, this guy, right? I keep it short and sweet. I have them, beforehand. I go, I would love it if you could, before we get in the call, just take a look at my reel and see what you guys have on the website. So we hop on, we can kind of dive right in, and then I ask them, I go, what does your kind of client book look like? What are their biggest concerns this year? What have you found has gotten people booked? Like, what are the bigger topics getting booked? What's the language? And I'm trying to get a feel for the client book to see kind of if they have clients that are in my price range. Typically, we know that if we're on the bureau already. But the other part is like, what are the clients they're dealing with talking about? What's the buzzwords? So that when you do a reel, and I tell them, and if you ever have this idea to put me in, what I do is I make a proposal video. It goes on a special landing page. Here's an example. I let them see it. I go on this page. It's a video of me talking right to your client. Now, I also tell them, I don't need to know your client's information, though, because I know it's your client and you've probably been burned in the past. Someone went and took a client behind your back and you didn't get paid. I'm never going to do that. So you can give me as much as you want. But what I'm going to do is the page I send them, I'm going to include your name in the video and your contact info on the page. So they're going to know it's from you. I'm going to tell them how great you are. And so now it's like, oh, dude, this speaker's making me, it's all these little things that when you put them together and they reach out, like someone goes, hey, we need a client for Coca-Cola, right? Brian Bogert. He's going to put a video together. He's going to have my name on it. I'm going to look good. Let's put him in that proposal. And then they keep sending you out. And now they get to learn how to talk about you and how to sell you and all this stuff looks good. You get the booking. And then guess who keeps putting you in different things because you're a winner? The same bureau, right?
That's also abundance too. Like that's you recognizing like the investment on both sides. I mean, truly, like it's win-win scenarios.
It is.
And very few people go to that level of effort to make sure that those that are opening doors for them win also.
Yeah.
And so that says a lot about you, bro. I love that. I love that.
I appreciate it, man. It was just me trying to find ways, to be honest. It was selfish because I was losing gigs a lot. This was probably like 3 years ago. I kept losing these bureaus, like opportunities. I'd get put in proposal or ask for my dates. And I kept losing. I go, why am I losing? I started asking them, what's going on? Like what I found was that they didn't know how to sell me, that they were apprehensive to put my video out because they didn't want me to backdoor them. Like I had to get like some insights, and I go, oh, that's what's going on. So I started mitigating.
Those are two hurdles I've run into. So I didn't, dude, I love it. Keep going. I didn't mean to cut you off. I'm sorry. I just wanted to say that literally those are the two things I've struggled with. The bureau's struggling to position me, and then them afraid to actually send my assets because they are afraid that we're going to backdoor it.
Yeah. So I talk to that. I go, look, anything I send over, I'm going to send through you. I'll give it to you to give over. They'll never have contact with me. Even when I have like pre-event, possible bookings, we're almost done, my man. So when I have like pre-event, like possible bookings, we'll call it. What I actually do is I have the bureau themselves, like they'll do things, but I'll let them know, hey, you can't contact me. Like when it's all said and done, if you need something, like you can't actually reach out to me. So I let them know that like I'm not the guy to talk to, and it makes the bureau person feel pretty good.
I love that. I love that, brother. Thank you. Again, that's another shortcut you just gave me based on your experience. So thank you.
It works, my guy. It works. So, dude, I've had a blast chatting, hanging out. Let's do this. Where can people go to find more out about you, the brand, all that fun stuff?
BrianBogert.com if you go on the web, or anywhere on social media at Bogert Brian. There's a lot of resources, a lot of information. We're actually about to launch a new website, which I'm super excited about. And so, yeah, man, anything I can do to help people, that's what I care about. And thank you for creating such an awesome platform for me to come pour some good in the world and to spend some time with you, brother. I love you, man.
Hey, welcome, man. Always a pleasure. You guys in the world who are enjoying this conversation, one, if you need something from this man, reach out to him. I don't care how it works out. Go find him. Go talk to him. If you garnered some piece of information from his discussion, apply it. That's all you got to do is apply it. It's really crazy how that simple thing can change your life. And if you know someone who needs to hear what he spoke about, take the link, put it in their inbox, however you do it, share with them, because that's how you grow, I think, a good world, by sharing good stuff with good people. Outside of that, have an amazing rest of your day, your week, whatever you got coming ahead. And if you're a speaker in the world, make sure you go out into the world and put your message out there so you can truly speak to freedom. It's Anthony Trucks and Brian Bogert signing off. That's a wrap for today's episode of the Speak to Freedom podcast. I hope you found our discussion inspiring and informative. Now, if you enjoyed today's episode and want to stay updated on all our future releases, be sure to hit the subscribe button on your favorite podcast platform. Thank you for tuning in today. Until next time, remember to speak with confidence and clarity so you can one day soon speak to freedom. See you in the next episode.